So after 18 months of continual strike action, a deal has been reached. It was voted on by members by the RMT. They have finally closed a deal with Rail Delivery Group to actually have their terms and conditions protected with a pay rise backdated to 2022-2023. We love to see it. The union action paying off at no loss of terms and conditions. That's what they were fighting for. That's what the union action was there for. And that is why you should join a union at home and should continue fighting for your terms and conditions, right? There's a reason why half of our country is working in the gig economy for awful people like Uber Eats, whereas countries with higher union density have got collective and sectoral bargaining agreements and much better pay terms and conditions than we do. Bit of a weird correlation there. So I'm going to watch this bit from Mick Lynch, the Giga Chad himself, talking on Times Radio of all places, discussing the deal, how they got to the deal, and what they're going to be doing moving forward. Because this suspends strike action for at least the next 6 months, I believe, should they need to, at some point, bargain for further pay rises or conditions later on. Let's have a look and see what the Giga Chad himself has to say for himself.
I've asked the industry to get around the table and settle these disputes as quickly as we can, but the government won't allow that. I think they want to keep disputes going as part of their agenda, because they don't really know what to do. They're incompetent and they don't really understand where the mood music is at the moment. We've achieved a modest pay offer. It doesn't match the rate of inflation that we've been subject to. But the difference between this and previous versions of offers is it's unconditional. We were told at the start of the dispute and this process that we would have to accept the closure of all our ticket offices.
Because that's the thing, right, is that the government has been intervening in the RMT strike action since its inception, right? Whether it be imposing these conditions like certain cuts to terms and conditions on the actual workers themselves, removing the ticket offices, indemnifying the employers themselves so they don't have any financial losses and therefore don't have any material reason to get around the table and negotiate, right? There's been plenty of interference from the state in these disputes. On top of that, people like the actual Department for Transport haven't actually been getting around the table to negotiate to try and end the disputes either. People like Mark Harper or Grant Shapps, who was in his position previously, have deliberately stayed away from engaging in negotiation to ensure that the strike action lasts as long as possible. Mick Lynch is right to castigate the government specifically for wanting strike action to continue, to drive a wedge between the population and the unions as if it's an intractable conflict, and not indeed a conservative government who is refusing to bother actually recognising what the unions do or don't do.
Driver-only operation, extension of working hours, they wanted to change and dilute our railway pension scheme, and a whole raft of measures. We haven't conceded one of those items, not any of them. But we've got an unconditional pay offer, which is backdated for 20 months, which is nearly 2 years of back pay coming to our members on their earnings. And we've got a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies through to the end of next year. So it's a step forward, and the companies will go now into a process with us starting next February for 3 months of...
They've kept all the jobs, they've kept all the terms and conditions, and they've got a backdated pay increase, right? Striking works. Striking works. You may not always get what you need, but you sometimes get what you want.
Fixed time negotiations, and we'll see at the end of that whether there are agreements. We will have the option then, if there's not an agreement and the companies want to push forward with those changes without our agreement, whether there is a fresh dispute. But as we've seen over the last year or so, everything can change. We may have a different government by then. We may have all sorts of changes. So if I was in their position, I wouldn't press so hard, because our members will resist these changes. The public are not on the side of the government, as we've seen with the ticket offices, and we want to get back to running the railway, earning a decent living and benefiting from the conditions that we've negotiated. And if we can do that, there's no need for strike action.
Right. Well, you're sounding fairly cautious, fairly restrained on this question of closing ticket offices. That seems to have gone off the table. And as you say, a lot of people, not just your union and your members, didn't like the idea of seeing those ticket offices closed. Do you think?
Yeah, union action works, guys. It's exactly what we're seeing. This is the bulwark. This is exactly what we were seeing in Sweden with the Tesla unions, right? As soon as one domino falls, the rest of them can fall in line, right? And these terms and conditions can be stripped back for everybody, right? The fact that Mick Lynch isn't fighting just for the RMT and his own members, he's fighting for the entire union movement, really and truly. Not just within this particular dispute, but against things like ticket office closures, which is not even anything to do with the pay dispute, right? But the unions used their bargaining power in terms of withdrawing their labour to ensure this didn't happen. We've seen plenty of other instances of unions being able to actually affect overall state policy through industrial action, in the same way that Unite the Union, representing porters in the NHS, negotiated with the government to have their actual contracts built back into public ownership rather than being subcontracted through some kind of recruitment firm. They negotiated through industrial action to be brought back in-house in terms of their employment, right? So it's not just pay, it's not just terms and conditions, but you can also affect state policy through industrial action. So, keep saying join a union, but you should do it, right?
And that could come back, or is it over?
Well, that seems to be over. They've been defeated on that overwhelmingly. 1 million people responded. I don't think there were any positive responses apart from Grant Shapps and his friends. So that's been defeated, and I can't see that coming back. They still want us to have lower rates of pay going forward. They actually want to reduce the rate of pay on the railway. They want to change all of our agreements on working time, on our sick pay, and all that kind of stuff that is important to people in any industry. But they basically want to make us like outsourced workers. And many people in this country are tired of that precarious work, bogus self-employment, agency work in gig economy. And we don't want to go that way. We want regular working arrangements, decent conditions that we...
Because that's what CWU were fighting against in the postal dispute, which they ended up coming to an agreement, which changed their working hours, which was a bad concession, but at least it stopped them from becoming fly-by-night couriers, right? And that's the problem. When huge swathes of our economy and of our labour market is being taken over by casualised work, whether it be Uber or Just Eat, or whether it would be courier services, all this kind of malarkey, which deems people to be independent contractors, why would you as an employer actually bother offering good conditions when you're not competing against good conditions elsewhere, right? When other people are getting all the benefits of this casualized workforce, you're missing out, right? And that's why you need to unionize your workforce to protect against this stuff.
We can negotiate and a decent rate of pay. That's all we're after, and we'll run the railway in return for that. And if they can leave us alone for a bit, we can get on with running the railway for the public. But it depends how hard they want to push it. In the new year.
Well, the tone of that, Mick, sounds like this is just a temporary respite, and you're fully prepared, maybe even half expecting more disputes, more strikes in the future, but with the current deal still on the table and unresolved.
Well, it is an interim deal, John. There will be 6 months where there'll be no strikes, and in that there will be a fixed 3-month period of discussions. It depends how hard they want to push that agenda. They haven't succeeded in getting any of their agenda across the table. There have been no job cuts, no changes to our conditions over the last 2 years because there was a build-up before we went on strike. We are still in that position. We will negotiate change, but we will not allow it to be imposed on us to our members' detriment. So if people want to work with us, they can work with us, and we can reform the industry. We can look at changes that don't cut our members' terms and conditions to pieces. So we don't want to go on strike, but we are an able union. We're serious people. We will negotiate, but if they want a conflict, they'll get it back in response. So my advice is, let's get round the table, let's do sensible negotiations, get an agreement and move our industry forward.
Okay, so what the rail travelling public want to know, of course, Mick, is their train going to be there when they need to get on a train? So for now, 6 months, you're no longer at war. ASLEF, the drivers' union, are still in dispute. What's it all going to mean for our rail services?
Well, ASLEF are still in dispute. We've got some train drivers that are still involved in that. ASLEF are the majority union. They haven't had an offer like ours. They haven't had an unconditional offer, which is what they're seeking. So I would advise the government and their agents in the train operating companies to make the drivers an unconditional offer, and we'll see what we can make of that.
Yeah, it's clear, it's obvious now, right? Just like how the nurses undermined a bunch of the other unions in unison, for example, by being asked to vote for and then voting for a deal in terms of agenda for change in the NHS, that undermined the bargaining position of the rest of the nurses when they were wanting to bargain for better pay than what they accepted, right? The reverse is also true of the employers, right? As soon as you got Network Rail to buckle, as soon as you got Rail Delivery Group to buckle on an unconditional offer, right? the other unions then have another position to bargain from. Say, well, you actually got this unconditional deal with the RMT, so we're going to go on strike until you match there. If you can do that deal for the RMT, then you can do it for ASLEF as well, right? And this is why it's really important to hold the line. You can't buckle like Christine McAnea and Unison did in the nurses' dispute, because all it did was undermine GMB and Unite and undermined the RCN, etc., etc. Right? When Pat Cullen tried her best to undermine the RCN herself, God bless her. But, you know, having that bulwark at the start there and holding the line so that there is no ability for people to undermine rhetorically the remaining bargaining position of everybody else works on both sides. It works on both sides, and you have to ensure you have a united front and wait for the other side to miss first, essentially, in this proverbial duel.
I know that train drivers want to operate the trains. They want to work in safe environment and operate the trains for the public. So let's get on with that. I've asked the industry to get around the table and settle these disputes as quickly as we can, but the government won't allow that. I think they want to keep disputes going as part of their agenda because they don't really know what to do. They're incompetent and they don't really understand where the mood music is at the moment. So my advice to the government, if they want to listen, is let's resolve these disputes and get on with running our railway on behalf of our people.
All right, Mick Lynch, good to talk to you as ever. Thank you, leader.
Yeah, it's really simple, right? If you don't want people to go on strike, if you want to resolve industrial disputes, get to the table, negotiate, and have a settlement, right? It's really actually quite simple, right? It's been shown to be very simple by Welsh and Scottish governments who've managed to close a bunch of these industrial disputes months and months and months ago that have continued over and over and over again in England. It's really weird how the one place where the Tories are in power, all these industrial disputes continue, yet they don't continue elsewhere in other devolved administrations. Very strange, but put it simple, if you want to actually have a negotiation, if you want to have a settlement, then we can have a settlement and then these strikes can end, rather than, indeed, introducing new legislation to conscript people if they don't, indeed, agree to the pay that has been offered to them by the state. So, just a little lesson there in future. And, of course, as always, join a union. Do it. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.